Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the fruit of the Spirit with Bjorklund.
We're taking a week to look at joy, one of the fruit of the Spirit, taking 9 weeks to look at each of these fruit. And we said that they grow together, meaning your joy should grow similarly. It doesn't mean that you're not outpaced by other of the fruit of the Spirit, because you'll have a natural head start with some, but they all grow because fruit is singular. So growing in a joy, the joy of the Lord is something that is natural for somebody who's born of God. So how do you get it? Well, in some ways, it's just the fruit of walking in the Spirit. So how do you get it? You walk in the Spirit. The more you try to manufacture joy, probably the harder it will be to manufacture joy. I mentioned yesterday that in Psalm 3 and Psalm 4, we get a little account and window into David's fleeing from his son who was trying to take his throne. And so his whole world's turned upside down. People are taking shots at him and his identity. And in the middle of chapter 4, verse 7, he says, "You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound." Grain and wine abounding, speaking of the harvest celebration, a feast, a great time of merriment. And he says, God, you've put more joy in my heart in the midst of all of this than anybody else. Now, again, look at verse 1 of chapter 4. Answer me when I call, O God, my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. By the way, relief is a word that means wide space and distress, narrow space. So he's saying you've given me a wide path, even in the middle of my distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned to shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? So now he's saying, you are trying to ruin my reputation. You are trying to destroy me. And he says, but I know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. And then he says this, commands in the Hebrew, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. So he's wronged. And he says, be angry and do not sin. This is what's picked up, by the way, in Ephesians. But be angry means you can feel it. Do not sin, that you can contain it. But offer right sacrifices or put your trust in God is be confident in God because he sets you apart. Verse 6, there's a sense in which you're favored. Verse 7, he's given you joy and he makes you safe. So where does joy come from? How do you get it? Well, it's being able to name what it is that you feel like is lacking for joy. You see, if it is causing a lack of joy, if you never name or articulate why you feel a sense of a lack of joy or you lack joy, what will happen is you'll just lack joy and you won't be able to name it. But by naming it, here it's be angry. And then contain it, say, do not sin. So in other words, be able to say, hey, I would like this to be different. And then he says, offer right sacrifices, put your trust in God, give it to God, because it is in this and that he was able to say, God, you've put more joy in my heart than when the grain and the wine are flowing. His sense was that God was at work. Alexander Gross, who wrote this in 1632 about this psalm, he said, where Christ reveals himself, there is satisfaction in the slenderest portion. And without Christ, there's emptiness, even in the greatest portion. Joy shows itself in that we say, I can have joy in anything. Paul David Tripp, writing more recently, said this, in his grief, speaking of David, and discontent, he knows remarkable peace. Why? Because at the deepest of levels, neither his peace nor his joy is based on circumstances, but on the God who rules the circumstances. If David's security is in God and God alone, then he has as much security in the cave as he does in the palace. Or we could say he has as much joy in the cave as he does in the palace. Where do you get joy? By naming the scenario where there isn't joy and then giving it to God and saying, God, I want to locate my glory in you, my trust in you, because you rule the circumstances and you are a good God who I know is at work even in a circumstance that I would not choose and I don't even like, but I'm going to trust you. David had joy in the cave in part because the fruit of God's work was in his life in this moment. And that can be true for me and for you when we come toward God.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.